completed hoods here. I'll mention right off the bat when you get started, if you want to sew by machine, obviously just skip punching all the holes out for all the stitching. But it also has those craft patterns, so any DIYer, just tape it down, that type of thing. Also, the scar, if you're going to be sewing the scars on there, you can almost just make any type of cut you want. I would suggest not putting it across the forehead section so it's not pulling weird. You could try. I usually just don't like doing that in that area. Really up to you. But when you do sew this section, pull these stitches a little tighter than you think. You want just a little bit of bunching so it looks like it's kind of holding that scar together. But you have a lot of options, a bunch of different eye hole options, all be in the pattern. Do you want the mouth, chin opening on there or not? Do you want to do scalloped edges? And then do you want to add this extra little scalloped piece to the end? Which each one of those is a separate piece. So you're not cutting a real long section out of a piece of leather. These little parts are good for scraps if you have a color. Towards the end of the video, I'll just go over sewing on machine just a little bit, talking about what I like to do to the seam if I'm doing that. Otherwise, when you're sewing by hand, you can do these top stitches. You can choose not to do them and even finish that seam like I would if I sewed it on a machine. But there's a lot of different ways you can do that, popping in and out, going back and forth. Just be creative with that. When it comes to that scar, if you're going to add something like that, it's really up to your discretion how you want to make those cuts. You can do 3 cuts and just kind of sew those together. However, you can see I did a little bit of a variety. How do you want to sew those cuts together? I usually skip those if I'm doing fancy scalloped edges and stuff, if I want it to look a little more refined, but there's just a lot of options. You can do however you feel. Cut your pattern just outside the lines. That way when we tape it down, the line is super easy to see. We can cut right on it. You have a choice between cutting the scalloped edges or that straight edge. This one I did the scalloped edges. I also chose to punch the holes for the extra pieces that will go on there. And you don't have to do those either if you do that scalloped edge. Also choose whether or not you want this mouth and chin opening and what size eye holes you want. However, I would say just cut, and you see I cut just to the inside of that first line that I'm going to be doing. There's one more inside of that. But do one of the small ones first and then decide if you want to go bigger. You can always place this back over the top and cut a little bit bigger eye hole. Or you could even cut just one small dot right in the center of that X, then have the person wear it. Decide where you want to cut the eye holes, because you can see these lines. You can adjust it from side to side a little bit if you mark it and then move that around. Before you cut everything out, you're going to want to do the eye, and if you choose to do the mouth, do that first. Just really take your time and go slow. Make sure the blade is sharp. And I like to pivot on a finger to make these turns. If it ever sticks in that little corner there, don't pull it loose. Come in and just tap that again with this knife or scissors. Be real careful. I have a couple parts cut out. You're going to line these edges up and you're sewing just that center line of holes. Those other two are for the fold and that top stitch. And you'll notice too that those are a little closer together than the other 2 rows. And I always like to start at the bottom here so I don't have to tie a knot, because we're using the saddle stitch method with a needle on each end of the thread. 4 times the length is going to be plenty. Make sure we're starting on that center line. There is 1 extra stitch there for that one in between these 2 rows. But I'll just start right here, second to the last hole. going to go from that center row to this one right on the point. So when you pull these stitches, you want that leather to bunch up and be tight just a little bit. Don't overly tighten. Same as the mitten videos that I have. You want just a little bit of bunching so that as things kind of stretch out and settle in, you're not having a bunch of stitches show. Harder to see on dark leather like this, but as you're coming through, just make sure you're hitting that center row of stitches. Just continue all the way up to the top. You can see the very small amount of bunching I have. Once you're done sewing that line, you tie the knot, you can pull and stretch this a little bit and it kind of locks those stitches in. But for the time being, just leave that as is to kind of give you a visual as you're going, how much you're bunching it up, just that littlest bit. And if you're like me, I'll have this off the end of a table and sometimes not even look underneath and just find the hole as I'm sewing. So if you're doing that, it's a good idea when you're coming back through to take a peek underneath. Just make sure something didn't get knotted up or stuck somewhere so you have a big loose stitch. Not that you can't fix it later, but it's a lot easier if you see it ahead of time. I finished sewing the other side, and you'll notice that when you get to the top, you just sew straight across right there. So with these top stitches, I like to kind of open it up and press them down just to kind of form it. You can tap it with a little mallet, but be real careful. You don't want to wail on it. You could rip stitches. Just starting that fold really helps. You can see it's still got that little bit of a bunchiness to it. You can kind of pull gently and just stretch that out. Kind of tighten those stitches, lock those stitches in. So I'll go just a little bit at a time, maybe flatten it out again, tap it with a mallet real lightly. And there's a few ways you can do this. You can do each side like the saddle stitching, so every single hole has a thread coming out and going back in the next. Or you can just go in and out so it staggers the stitch. Really, however you want to do this. You can even go a few stitches and cross over the seam just to give it that look, or cross over diagonally. So what I like to do to get started, really any way you want to do it, if you want to tie a little knot and start under there. But I just kind of do it this way. It might be a little more complicated, but whatever, that's just how I'm doing these. That second hole, not the one real close to the seam, but the next one out. You can see there's two on the back here. But I'm not going to start going through this. I'll start right here. I'm going to take that other needle and go through the seam to pop out the other side. So I'll just go through that hole right here, straight across to this side, and then pop up that other hole. So then as I sew, it's kind of hidden underneath there. Plus I'm sewing those ends on. Really, it's just personal preference. So I'll just do a couple stitches on one side and continue on the other for the rest of the way. With this one, you gotta be more careful not to pull too tight. You want it to look nice without bunching anything up. A little bit snug is good though. You don't want them loose either. So you'll see some waviness. I'll just get a couple start on this side and then I'll do the other. Just enough so it doesn't loosen past up this side where I'm starting here now. Then that stitch comes right to the edge, but you can just start right on that stitch too. You don't need to start there and make it complicated. You can just start at this one right here. Like I said, however you want to do it. I'm kind of interested to see how people do this seam. Maybe just hop back and forth the whole way, just do a couple here and there. I don't know, so many ways you could do this. But as you're sewing up, if you can still get in there easily, from this side, that's totally fine. Take a peek in here. And I like to leave my thumb behind that other thread so I can kind of direct it in so it's not grinding away on the leather. And then pinch right about here, just lock that in. If you go back too far, it might bunch that up too much, or if you just grab it and pull, you're going to be bunching that up too much. And also feel underneath if that kind of wraps around and knots up or anything. Stop before you lock it in. So if you get a little far up there, and you can see I didn't really fold that out very far because we're actually going to flip this back inside out to keep going. I find it a little easier. So I'll just bring this to the inside. And we'll finish it up from this side. You can see you can get all the way to the end. A lot easier than if you were trying to do it the other way around. So for a bit, you can still just do what we were doing before. Just feel. The only thing is, as you're pulling that needle through, don't just yank it through. The end could scratch. So I'll usually keep my finger in front of it. Try to be a little more gentle. And then the same when I'm feeling for the next hole. I won't just slide the tip of it around too much. Try to be gentle. And again, I'm keeping my thumb behind that thread. Pinch right here, lock it in. And once you get real close to the top, we'll change the method of which we're sewing again a little bit. And I'll do it this way I'm about to show you when I get to the end anyways. Is I'll just come down that one layer. Take a look, find those two holes underneath, go through it, and then just pop right back out. You can't do it through multiple layers. You could try, but it gets pretty hard. And this is where I'll tighten it up. Then just come out this one, down the next one. Then I can see these two holes underneath. Pop through them right back out. Don't necessarily have to stitch it like this at that point, but you will have to when you get towards the top here. You just can't get your hands in there enough. You can take a peek or feel underneath with your hands while you're going to make sure these don't get twisted up. Stitches stay nice. It can help to put a little weight on it so it's not moving around. But you'll see getting your hands way up into that point is going to be real hard. So I just continue on with that method I showed earlier. Then I'll just do the one hole at a time. And then that way I can go in and out these two without having to be in there. Tighten it up. A few ways you can do these. If you really wanted to put them on the outside, you could. I always prefer them on the inside, and a lot of times I would prefer to go this way. And you'll see these holes will line up just fine on that seam. I still use the double needle method. I like how it looks. Start right on one of those corners, which is going to be this first hole here. So every time I come through, I'll hold that one up. So this one always falls on this side of that thread. Now when you pull these, just the tiniest bit of bunching, even less than that seam, this isn't going to have a whole lot of stress on it. So you don't want them all bunched up and weird, but you do want to make sure those stitches get snug enough. Just that little bit of bunching, because then it'll stretch out and lock those stitches in. I like to pinch just a stitch or two back and then pull it. That'll tighten these up without yanking on them and bunching stuff up. This hole right on the point, what I'll do is I'll come up, but I'll go right behind that very first stitch so that it doesn't fall back down. So that stitch going across this seam is what's holding that needle from popping out the end. Then it'll look real nice coming right across that seam. When you're getting towards the end of these red ones, sometimes they'll go out of the way, so just make sure the needle's passing through where you want it to. This is the last hole, which is the corner of those 3 holes on the black part there. So before we add the next part in, we're actually going to go to that center hole of those 3. And then that's when we add this next part on, which will come up through here. And this is right how we started that first one, right in that corner. See, I have a 3/8 inch seam allowance set up, and instead of just putting a piece of tape this way, I did a little point, so then you can see how far, if you do come across this way a little bit, it just makes it a little easier to keep that 3/8 inch seam allowance really dialed in. I like to use some double stick tape on the seams. See, I went up to about that far. You don't have to, but a top stitch or using this double-sided tape that will be available in my shop kind of smooths out over the nose and the eyes. So I suggest doing it at least like this section. Don't have to, just my personal preference. But if you are going to use that, it helps to flatten this out a little bit. You can even give it a tap. Don't wail on it because you're going to rip some stitches. You want to get it close to the edge, but not right up to it. And if anything, press the tape so that it's almost got slack. You don't want to pull it and tighten it as you're going across here. Just lay it down just short of the end. This will help create some rigidity too, so that it won't stretch out and move quite as much either. Sometimes you gotta press it down real good before it'll peel. Gotta lay it down nice and flat. Don't spread this apart too hard, but get it flat, and then you'll just press your fingers right in that center of that seam. And don't run your fingers across it and stretch it. Press and move so that it's equal across the whole way. And again, a little tap doesn't hurt. Just lets everything lay nice and flat across those seams. You can see on this back one here where I stop the tape. See, it's nice and flat, and then it opens up a little. You can kind of see more roundness coming off that seam. Either way is totally fine though. However you want to do it. And this one I did one of those cuts on there. Stitched it to look. And when you do that, pull them a little bit tighter than you think, because that little bit of bunching it gives it helps that look.